Hi everyone, welcome to our UJV Europe webinar where we're going to be talking about our UJV Europe team's recent experience in Greece. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to write it in the chat. And also, can you let me know if everyone can see us and hear us clearly, please? I think we are good to go, ladies. The floor is all yours. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you all. I think today's a little bit of an intimate webinar, but I actually just want to call it more of a recap and a get together so that we can share our experience in Greece. We had a wonderful time. In total, I think between all of us there, we were on the ground really for more than 10 nights, and it was a wonderful experience. So I'm going to jump into that in a bit. But first, I just want to say my name is Michelle. I'm leading the Europe team, and I have myself and Christina taking charge on this feedback webinar with y'all. So we're really excited, and just a big thank you to you all. Before we really jump into everything, I wanted to give you a little bit of a glimpse of UJV Europe overall and kind of what we're really focusing on so that everyone can have an idea of how we can best support you on your itineraries. And really, when we're saying the word itinerary, so much comes to mind, complexity, logistics, all of the things, different time zones. And so I just want everyone to know here that we absolutely handle multi-country itineraries. We will do, the rail, the air, the transport coordination, hydrofoils, ferries, VIP meet and greet. And then of course we have an extensive network of our own private expert guides and drivers. And we still very much support you all throughout the trip with 24/7 support. And we have an in-travel line, which is a little bit newer for us and really excited to share, but that is something that we're adding on to all of our 2026 trips. Alongside, of course, our in-country specialists. So I just wanted to make sure all were on that train because it's super exciting for us. And then also share, just our focus right now is very much full itinerary, and we're so much more than, a booking engine. We're very much a true partner to you. We will build the full itinerary, whether it's consulting from scratch or if you already have, some bits and pieces and you want for us to add to them. We'll handle all of it beyond just the hotel. And we very much specialize in, the complex things, a fully luxury itinerary that maybe has 3 different countries, multiple different logistics going on, or something that might be a little bit smaller, a little bit more intimate, very FIT style, where it's a honeymoon and they're really specializing in 1 or 2 different areas of their journey in one destination. And then, of course, with that concierge level service on every trip. So I just wanted to give a big glimpse of Europe before we focus in on Greece in particular. And I think many ask kind of the question, what are we doing in Greece? What can we do in Greece? And why is Greece having its moment? And for me, the biggest piece there, especially after having been there recently, is, the first time you go to Greece is certainly not the last time you go to Greece. The first time you go, I think, really unlocks where you're going to go to next, your style and what you like. And with that, I think it also shows exactly where to actually deliver to clients, right? Some clients might want something a little slower paced. Others might want something a little bit more island hopping style. And Greece is having its moment because there's just so much variety. And it's also very logistical. So I feel like it is a good opportunity to really collaborate and partner and be able to give you, that full expertise, for your clients directly and support you in any which way. And then demand is incredibly strong, as Mykonos, Santorini, all of these big names, but there are certainly many islands that are still getting very discovered, like Naxos, Paros, even Milos, which we were super excited to hear. We're going to have amazing partnerships with some hotels opening up in the very near future. And so we'd be very excited to kind of collaborate on any itineraries in the next year for that as well. But I wanted to dive in directly to what our itinerary looked like when we were on the ground. And with this, I think we have a nice map on the next slide, actually, if we want to hop into that one, because this kind of gives you the overarching big picture of where we were. And we started in Crete, which for me was wonderful. And we spent around 3 nights there. I had spent 2 prior to just kind of the full team's arrival. And I think that was a wonderful amount of time to spend just because Crete is so massive and there's so much to see and it's so welcoming. And then we hopped over to Santorini for 3 nights, followed by Kea for a night, and then Athens for 2 nights. So that's just the overall plans for what we did. And of course, that sounds like many places to see in a short span of time. So of course, the logistics are the most important part. I think, on how to really connect any of these islands together. And I will say we really took it all. You know, we took a plane, we took a boat, we took a ferry, we took a helicopter. And so I certainly want to give you a bit of a understanding on what that really looks like. So between Crete and Santorini, we took a ferry. It was an hour and a half. It was fantastic. Between Santorini and then hopping over to Kea, we actually took a flight over to Athens, followed by a ferry directly into Kea. And then from Kea back to Athens, we did a helicopter, which was the highlight of the trip, I think, for all of us logistically, and a little bit more on that later. But I wanted to give you all kind of a glimpse at large of all of the spots that we hit on this trip. Um, and kind of really with that, I think Crete, in terms of highlights, I think we can go over two slides actually, Adri, if we want to continue on to Crete. But Crete, in terms of its highlights, I always want to start off by saying Crete is massive. It is the largest Greek island, that in the Mediterranean, and in particular, there's really two sides to Crete. So when you say Crete, we really need to think: are we thinking Chania, which is on the western side, or are we thinking Heraklion, which is more in the middle, but really the majority of the hotels are kind of in between Heraklion and Elunda. So there are really two servicing airports at this time for Crete, and I'd say it completely changes the journey depending on where your clients are flying into, because between one point and the other, it's up to 4 hours, from one side of the island to the other. Directly from Chania to, let's say, Elunda, that's 3 hours. So it's certainly not something you could do a day trip to. So it'll absolutely shape, the trip for the clients depending on where they choose. I would say, because I did stay in both areas actually, Elunda is where we focused on the most. And you get a nice, calm, luxurious base feel because it's directly in front of Spinalonga Island. And so it feels very protected. It feels very village-like, and it is actually, because Plaka Village is directly in front all of the hotels that are there. But it also feels really warm, and it feels, just peaceful. It's not loud at all. Crete is not one of those islands where it's kind of that party feel, or kind of like that young, nightlife feel. You can of course find different things for everybody. There's so many different options, but it's a spot that I'd say is actually great for families. My 1-year-old did accompany us on this fam, which was an interesting thing to see, just because he was so welcomed by just how amazing the Greek hospitality was. But then I also saw many honeymooners and groups of friends traveling, and so that was really nice to see as well. And I'd say Elunda can really service it all, and that's where I think we saw some of the highest luxury properties that you could possibly see. And then in Hanya, it's a little bit more of like a quaint town, old town, kind of, on cobblestone that you're going to see, and it's absolutely sensational. But it is a different feel, right? So I'd say if someone wants to say, I want to stay in one spot in Crete for 5 nights, that for me would be the Elunda side. And then if someone says, I want to do a split stay in Crete and we want to see a couple of different things, absolutely. We can do 2 or 3 nights in Hanya, followed by 2 or 3 nights over on the Elunda side. And that's just kind of like Crete logistically, and all of the different home bases in one. And of course, I want to pass it off to Christina to give her take here too, and then share, some of the highlights from Crete in her opinion.
Oh, Crete was fabulous. I was only on the Elunda side. We stayed at the Faya Blue, which is fabulous. We also learned that Rihanna had also stayed there, and Lady Gaga, so that gives you some idea of what the caliber of the property is. Right off the coast is Spinalonga Island, which we did a day trip to, which was beautiful. It's an abandoned, obviously at this point, leper colony. It's really an entire community that was built solely for the leper patients in Greece. It was fascinating. It's very well maintained. It was a beautiful day. We got there early in the morning. So we got there, did our tour, and was out before the crowds. Following that, we got picked up by a boat, and we were taken to a private island where we had lunch, which was just a beautiful day, and swam. It was great. Highly recommend. Highly recommend.
Yes. And I actually have to say that's kind of like a combo day too that we did, because many times someone might go to Spinalonga and then that's the adventure of the day. And then maybe the next day they'll do a boating experience. But I really enjoyed that we combined that day actually, because it turned into a full day. And then we had kind of the best of both worlds. We had, a private guided experience, and we were in a little bit of the crowds because Spinalonga, of course, is being seen and explored by all who kind of pop in and out on that day. And then we had a true kind of wow moment when we hopped on the boat and we were picked up without anyone else, and all of the crowds kind of looking at us, and I could tell they were jealous because we had a private boat and they were getting on a ferry with a bunch of people. So that was really nice, and certainly something I would recommend to all clients if they want to enjoy, a full complete day like that, or separating out those activities. Absolutely is a must, because you are staring at Spinalonga from any of the properties in Alunda. So to not go there would be silly, in my opinion, for sure. And then, I mean, that really concludes, I'd say the highlight experiential piece for me. I know that there's so much more that we would have loved to explore there, but primarily kind of just the olive oil production and doing something more local and intimate. That is absolutely an option as well for clients. One that we had more on site at Fea Blue, and then cooking classes as well is something that we enjoyed, and that is something that I would recommend clients do, especially if there are kids involved, because it's not one of those overbearing cooking classes. It's one of those classes where you go in, you kind of make something and it's already half prepared for you, and you feel part of it, and you're enjoying, some food and a nice spread and really talking to locals before you kind of just have lunch and then enjoy the rest of the day at leisure. But yeah, that concludes Crete for us. And then we hopped over to Santorini. We did it via ferry, which was an hour and a half. And I always want to kind of pause to explain what the ferry was like, because many people, haven't been on a ferry in Greece, and it's not, going to be, for example, a private boat experience. And there are 3 different classes when you book a ferry. And, most people will say, I want the highest class. And absolutely, we can certainly book that. But I recall when I booked the ferry, I actually wanted to make sure we had a table in front of us, because it was an hour and a half. It was an early in the morning one. And I wanted for us to be able to have coffee and kind of put everything down on the table. And only the middle class has the tables directly in front of them. So that is something important to also share with the clients. But interesting enough, kind of the middle class requires you walk up an entire flight of stairs. And so if you want the clients to be easiest access onto the boat without needing to climb up stairs because either reduce mobility or they want to be the first off, I would actually recommend the entry level seats on the ferry, because they're just as spacious, but they just don't have the details of kind of their own little lounge area that might be separate, or the table directly in front of them. But again, kind of thinking about the logistical piece and thinking about how many people are on the ferry and kind of getting on and off easier. If someone wanted to consider that, of course, I would recommend they look at where the individual cabin is going to be situated. But arriving into Santorini was super easy. It was super fast. That hour and a half sped quite by, and I was a little nervous about the ferry actually, because I don't do too well on boats, which I thought was super ironic going into Greece. And I actually had a great time. I wasn't impacted at all by anything. And then in terms of just highlights, most people, when they think Santorini, are instantly going to think of the caldera, which is directly in Ia. And for me, it was so interesting being on Santorini, because you arrive there and you think, okay, we're going to go to the caldera and that's going to be it. I'm not going to want to leave here. And you certainly feel that way, because it's such a wow moment when you see the properties, which we have, of course, a fantastic collection of that we work with. But the experience of actually going from village to village was so much more impactful and meaningful, I believe, for all of us, really, that we said, wow, we would have spent many more days here exploring different villages, doing exactly what we did, which was just kind of like walking around, taking pictures, having our Instagram moment. Our guide was just the best photographer in the world. He absolutely understood what his assignment was, just to make us feel really welcomed and special. And he wanted to show us his hometown. So I'd say that, beyond Ia, there's so much. And of course, Megarovigli, Perlavos Beach, Megalachori, all of these spots that we kind of hear about. And then of course, Fira, they all have their own charm to them. They're all a little bit different, but they do all, of course, share that kind of whitewashed village, kind of overlooking the hills or the valleys. And many times, of course, the caldera. So wherever the clients choose to go, they're going to have a fantastic time. But Santorini for me is number one, not a beach destination. It's an let me go out and explore destination. And so it's very important for clients to do something, whether it's a winery visit, whether it's just a half day or a full day exploration, or of course, boat day, which is, I'd say, key. And then that is my take. Long story short, let's call it. But let's go for Christina. Would love your take on Santorini, please.
Santorini was fabulous, and everybody's idea of Santorini are the whitewash cliff hotels, etc. But there was so much more there. We had this fabulous guide, Costas. He's wonderful. We work with him and his team in Santorini and in Athens. We did a 4-hour tour of the island, which was just amazing. We went to little local villages. I mean, there was a kindergarten getting out, which was really fun to see because, well, Michelle has kids and I have kids. And it was really a true experience about what it's like to live in Santorini. Had we had more time, there were a lot of little local places we could have had lunch. In addition, we got to see some of the beach clubs where the better beaches are. They're not necessarily at the hotel. And like I said, our guide Costas knew Santorini uphill, downhill, backwards, and we learned about old history, new history, how they got on the map as a tourist destination. And again, I'd highly recommend doing the tour, getting outside of the caldera, and actually seeing what Greece is really all about. It was wonderful.
I'd say too, I feel like just before we hop into Kea and Athens, some of the most important questions that we get about Santorini are really logistical because I feel like until you go there, you like the caldera is just something else. And I understood fully why, the no kids rule on the caldera was so important. And it is something to be understood really by all who are kind of listening here and just to the clients, because if someone kind of wants that wow factor view, that is most definitely the caldera properties. And all of the properties are one in a row. In fact, you can't do any connecting rooms there because it's truly kind of on a hill, on a cliffside, and these are caves, that later became hotels. So that's why the rooms tend to be a little bit smaller, but they all have a water element and they all have a view. And that is really important to know that it's truly cliffside and it's very dangerous for children, which is why the hotels are super strict on that. We actually stayed, our home base was the Andronis Arcadia while we were there, and it is the only hotel that has a kids club. I felt really good with, my 1-year-old exploring, playing around, doing his thing there. But had we even kind of gotten close to the caldera with him, I would have been incredibly nervous, like even if it was just for 5 minutes, because truly like the walls are short and it is cliffside. So that is something to be known as well for anyone who asks for an exception. On caldera properties, kind of the why behind that. I would never want to put parents in a stressed situation when they're on, their trip with their kids. And then other really good options, to consider with kids for those who really want to stay in IA. Very much kind of a epitome was sensational as well, just because there's a lot more ground area. It's flat. It is an IA, but it's just not directly on the caldera, along with a bunch of other really fabulous options. But those are the two that we kind of had the most intimate experiences with, or we could really tell. And it really was shining to us, kind of the stark difference between caldera and not caldera when you're in IA. And then we hopped over to Athens. And this is where kind of the peak logistical situation with us really was shining through. And what we did is we flew from Santorini to Athens, and we understood that weather controls all in Greece, truly, because if there's too much wind, if there's too much chop, if the seas are too rough, speedboats will be canceled. They will not be able to depart. And ferries actually might be either delayed or canceled altogether in the case that something is really severe wind-wise. Now, ferries tend to be the most stable option in Greece. And so if those are departing, it's because it is safe. They're never going to risk it. And actually, to our surprise, helicopters as well are incredibly safe in the wind because of the short distance and also the way that they fly and the routes that they take to avoid wind in particular. So I'm kind of setting the stage for us in Athens and for Kea, because the logistics are really everything on how you get to the island. So on arrival in Athens, what we did is we hopped in our transfer. We made way to the one and only Estasis. And had there not been any wind, we actually would have taken a speedboat directly over to Kea Island. And that would have been a half hour. And we would have arrived at one and only Kea, directly from the speedboat. And that would have been spectacular. I would recommend it for every client that is incoming, because it's a very quick and beautiful and just wow moment way to arrive to your next point. And arriving into Kea Island, otherwise, you have two other options. You can take a transfer over to Lavrio Port, which is about an hour, and then you can take a ferry from Lavrio Port over to Kea Island, which is about another hour, followed by a 20-minute transfer from the port up to the hill, and which is kind of cliffside within a cove of Kea Island. And then the other option is a quick 15-minute helicopter directly over to their helipad from Athens. So those are kind of the three options on how to arrive into Kea. However you arrive, it is probably the most magnificent entrance that I have ever experienced kind of in that way, because you're on a hill, it's overlooking just the beautiful sea. Sunset time is just very in your face. There's a telescope, you know, it almost feels like a wellness resort because of how beautiful and how welcoming and how peaceful and just magnificent the lobby is. And then getting into your room, because they're all individual I'd call them one bedrooms, because they also have villas, but the baseline is a one bedroom, followed by 2-bedroom villas, 3-bedroom villas, and they're continuing to build out villas. But they all are directly facing the water. They all have the same exact view. They all have the same exact decor. And it's just fantastic, you know, for kids, for honeymooners, and even for friends and for families that are traveling together. There's so much to do there, between beaches and exploring kind of the full island, between being out on a boat, between just hanging out and enjoying the spa, which is massive and incredibly accommodating for, you know, a peaceful afternoon. They have a complete gym. And then, or the kids club, which I spent quite a bit of time at, and was the best kids club I have seen on our trip at the one and only in Kea Island. So lots of options, and I wanted to kind of give you my take on how I perceived Kea Island and just the overall arrival in there. And then I'll kind of hand it to Christina, and if you actually want to give your take on departure as well, go for it. I think it'll be a good story.
Yeah, well, a departure. Getting there, we were traveling with a 1-year-old, so bear in mind that's always more of a challenge. So the getting to the island took basically 3 hours. So on the outbound, it was Michelle's birthday, and she's like, "That's it for my birthday. We're not taking a 3-hour ferry, etc. We're taking a helicopter." So we took a helicopter. Weather wasn't great, so we were a little bit nervous, but apparently helicopters, which we now know, are safer than a speedboat in the windy conditions. So we took a 15-minute helicopter ride from their heliport to the heliport in Athens. It was beautiful. It was an adventure, and highly recommend it. And way better than a 3-hour ferry transfer. The views were just absolutely stunning.
I think we landed, and I said that was absolutely worth it. You kind of celebrated. I think we were a little nervous just because of the ferry on the way back. But it's important to say, you know, as well, that any client, you know, who's incoming, the speedboat, helicopter, or the ferry, it's all going to be a great experience. It's just setting the right expectation for them. Because if it's a true luxury client, you know, the ferry, particularly over to Kea Island, it's not, you know, a luxury ferry. It's much more local. And if they want that experience, it'll be great. It's just super important to set that expectation for them. Also, if there happens to be a little bit of rough waters and someone does suffer a little bit more from seasickness, which I do, which I think facilitated me being a little bit more open to taking the helicopter, it is just something for them to have, you know, either not Dramamine, but like they sell travel gum, or they sell anything like that directly in the pharmacies, because that helps tremendously as well. Nothing to be nervous about, just really to kind of make sure the clients are aware. And then, you know, arrival into Athens was great. We were picked up directly from the helipad. We went over to the one and only Stasis. I'm not sure if all here are kind of familiar, but you have, of course, Athens City Center, which is where you'll have, you know, properties like the Dolly. And then you also have Glyfada, which is a bit more of a residential neighborhood. And that's where the one and only Stasis is located. And I really enjoyed having a more residential feel, especially prior to the international departure, because it was a lot more spacious. It wasn't directly in the middle of the hustle and bustle, which for me with a 1-year-old was really important to kind of lean into. But I was really happy as well that I had the experience of going into the Dolly, because it was just such a marvelous experience and actually really sheltered from the city, kind of hustle and bustle and noise. But I felt so welcomed when I was there. And all of the rooms were just super cozy, and the decor is really fun and unique. And I believe they have some of the best views that you can actually see of the entire Acropolis directly in front on their rooftop, which is, of course, has a pool as well, and anyone can go to have lunch there. So for me, kind of regardless of where someone chooses to be located in Athens, everything is super close. It's all about kind of what clients want to lean into. If they want to be somewhere a little bit more residential, if they want to be directly on the water, if they want a villa, that of course is going to happen at something like the one and only Stasis, or if they want to be kind of directly in the action, super easy access to seeing all of the sites, like going into Plaka, going in and seeing the Acropolis, all within walking distance, that's of course going to be something much more city center. But for me, it was nonetheless marvelous to experience kind of the full take of everything that you can do. I feel like now I have a much better understanding of where I want to go do the next time that I'm in Greece. And I actually want to share that with you because I was super excited to hear that there is a lot of stuff going on for Milos Island. And then, of course, kind of Paros and Naxos as well. And I believe that I would very much focus on that for my next trip, which is important to understand too for clients, because maybe someone's already been to Athens, they've already been to Crete, and they're like, oh, well, should I go back to Greece? Yes, absolutely. You should go back to Greece. There's so much to see, many islands and all with their own flavors. So it's really just about kind of finding what's going to suit them. And with that, I don't know if kind of, Christina, you have anything else to add? I feel like I went a mile a minute just because there were so many things we enjoyed.
So many things. So many things. A nice thing to know with the one and only in Athens is it's a little bit out of the city. It's about 30 minutes with traffic. But if you're traveling with kids, it's great. All the rooms have two beds. A lot of the rooms have have like a pool or a backyard. And in addition to that, there's actually a beach there. So if you're traveling with young kids and there's nothing to do it's a city. So inside Center City with children, there's not much to do. The nice thing with the one and only is you can do the sightseeing, get out of the city, and come back to the hotel where the kids can play on the beach, or you have a pool at your room. So it's a fabulous option for families.
Yes, I think the tone of our trip was, of course, just catering to my situation of having my 1-year-old accompany us, and I think it was actually a very good learning experience on how families might travel. I do actually want to share that because I feel like many times people might think, oh, well, what are the kids going to do when we're out and about doing a half day exploration? And honestly, like regardless of where we think of hustle and bustle or this, that, or the other thing, kids are super adaptable. And Europe in general, and Greece in particular, it is so welcoming. And so I would always recommend to clients, if they're considering one thing or the other on if it's going to work for their kids, it absolutely will. I would never kind of tell a client to not go somewhere or kind of to hesitate even for a second on going to any of these properties, because they're all incredibly accommodating and it will work for a honeymooner. It'll work for a family with a small kid. It'll work for a family with two, maybe teenagers. It's absolutely kind of going to be, there's something for everybody there. And with that, I just want to share too that Athens is certain Greece. We have many islands that are seasonal, of course, but Athens is, a full year-round destination. And it's actually a really good stepping stone to a couple of other spots, whether it's going directly into Dubai or maybe even to Turkey or kind of even other spots in Europe in case someone wants to do a multicultural, multi-country exploration in what we would call the off season, but I would just call it the winter, right? Because many people go to Europe for winter, for Christmas markets. And it's really just a note to keep Athens in mind for that too, because there is so much to see. And of course, there won't be those crowds as well, or the peak heat of, August. So it is definitely a spot to consider full year round. I think our next slide is actually just, selling the perfect sequence. And with that, I want to share, we of course did Crete, Santorini, Kea, and Athens, but that could have looked totally different, right? We could have ended in Crete. We could have started in Athens. And so there's many different ways to shape an itinerary. And for me, it's all about property selection and making sure that the clients kind of let you know, and of course you let us know what they're looking to experience. Because if someone's looking to experience just total relaxation, hanging out, on the beach, there is something for that, right? And I would say, okay, why don't we consider something like Crete? Why don't we consider something like Thea Blue? And why don't we put it actually at the end of the itinerary? Because that way it's that wow moment, relaxed at the end of their trip after they've already maybe done something a little bit faster paced, like going to Athens at the beginning, or maybe going into Santorini at the beginning, right? Somewhere where maybe you are going to be out and about exploring instead of just enjoying the property for a series of days. And then the same kind of goes for the logistical piece, so that we're not doing something overly complex, at the end. So all of that just goes to say that although this was our lineup for the trip, our entire team is very, very accustomed to designing everything from scratch and really making it showcase what the clients are wanting to feel at the end of their trip, and ordering the properties in a way that kind of continues to ramp it up for them, I think is super key and super important. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that too, Christina, on if you kind of would arrange things differently that we did, or kind of what you would recommend as well. But go for
It
it,
really
if
just
so.
depends on whether you're honeymooners, traveling with kids. I think Athens as the first stop is not such a bad idea because a lot of people don't spend a lot of time there. So take your nonstop flight into Athens, do your sightseeing, and then hit the other islands where you have time to relax a little bit more.
Yeah. And then Kea Island too is an interesting one because I I actually think it would have been a wonderful, like, okay, let's spend the last 3 nights of the trip here, especially if you're helicoptering out and just directly going to, 10 minutes away from the international airport. But it's also a good entrance in case someone's kind of, wanting to start on that tone. But it is kind of like a very good and strategic location because it's one of the closest islands directly to Athens as well. So it's not far out in comparison to others. So really kind of an invitation to always consult and kind of see what your clients are looking to experience, and we can craft around that. I think this kind of concludes like the most of what we wanted to showcase because of course there might be many questions. I've not been paying attention to the chat. Um, and yeah, I just want to say thank you. I know we were kind of discussing many things. And it's just a reminder kind of on why you all might choose UJV Europe. And that really is the end-to-end support on absolutely anything that you need, from designing the trip to, true in travel situations that will fully handle, with you and for you, with your clients. Our, curated network of guides and of drivers and just our team in itself, white labeling everything for you and for your clients, and then just clear communication, quick turnaround, and transparent pricing for you all. But we're super excited. We have a fabulous team that is all dedicated exclusively to Europe. We have our European concierge team as well. And I'm happy to share that we're very tight knit. So although you might be working with your one dedicated reservation sales agent, everybody talks, everybody collaborates. And so you're always pulling from the strengths of the entire team when you work with us. And that is something I think is super important to highlight as well, which is also just my favorite part of the team. So thank you all. And of course, any questions you have, I think, Mariana, if you can access the chat, I can't see it, unfortunately.
Yes, we have one question from Kelly. She would like to ask, what were your thoughts on the construction going on for the big new development across the water from one and only Astices?
Um, I actually didn't notice the
Why?
at all at the one and only
Yeah.
Estasis. And, I'm someone who would have noticed that for sure. Just because I'm so attuned to any type of noise because I don't sleep as much as I used to pre-baby. So like any small noise, I hear it for sure. I didn't notice anything at all. What I did see is that because I went to the beach, I enjoyed the beach. My son made a little friend on the beach, and I didn't notice any construction, to be honest with you. It might have been like the day that we were there, but nothing impacted us in the slightest.
Awesome, thank you. We have a comment from Katie. Thank you for your input, very helpful regarding the ferries, and good to know you are very full service there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for me, like the highlight of the trip was really getting to know the logistics. Of course, enjoying and being there and taking in everything, but the logistics for me is like my little passion on like how do you get from point A to point B? How is it really? Is it just the picture? Is it, so any questions you all have, please always ask us.
Awesome. We have a question from Carol. To clarify full service, you will do ferries, activities, and transfers.
Oh, yes, we do it all. The ferries will handle them, the transfers, helicopters, we will handle it all. We will do the full itinerary. And I actually want to share with that too, that our focus is full itinerary. We're not focusing on just hotels for Europe in particular, which does differ kind of from the rest of the regions that UJV services. But if you ever have a services only booking where, we're only doing the services and maybe you already booked the hotel or the client already booked the hotel, we will absolutely do that too, just because we know that the logistics is honestly the hardest part. And that's where we really want to shine for you.
Awesome. And we have a question from Lindsay. Looking at this from a family lens, taking into account the travel between islands and logistic, do you feel 3 destinations is the right amount for a 10-ish day trip? Clients always want to see everything, so always trying to get a feel for what makes sense.
I mean, I absolutely think so. Of course, every family has their own, thing going on, right? Like my son was trained from birth, to be traveling with me. He's accompanied me on every single trip that I've done, and for us, I think 3 spots. We did 4 just specifically in Greece. That was great because after kind of 3 days, unless you want to be in a villa for a whole week or have that kind of experience, which is different, right? And we can absolutely do that too. You're kind of ready and excited to go see something else. And I think that it really does work, but the logistics need to be on point. So picking the time of the ferry, picking the time of the flight, all of those things really are super important when you're traveling with a family. Because, for example, when you're traveling with a family, me personally, I always pick a flight that is just around nap time or is just around like after someone already ate, like things like that. And our team, of course, you don't need to have kids necessarily to plan to this level and to this degree, but we're very understanding of those types of things, right? We're not just going to say, oh, well, this is the ferry that's available or this is the flight that's available. It needs to work for the clients, and it needs to make their day easier, not make their day harder. So that is something that absolutely I'd say, 3 spots in 10 nights. I'd say you could honestly, you could do 4. Might be pushing it a little bit though, because the 3 night stay in most spots is the most comfortable.
Awesome. We
Sorry, that
have
was
another.
long-winded.
That's okay. We have another question from Zoe. What would be an estimate cost per person per day?
It really depends, especially in Greece, because different islands and different locations vary so much. So the biggest example that I have for you is just being on the caldera in Santorini versus being off the caldera in Santorini could be a difference of $1,000 a night. And the properties are still, 5-star, right? And still a beautiful experience. It's just location really setting the tone for things. But I'd say in general, when we're thinking about a fully fleshed itinerary with, all of the works, something happening every day to the maximum degree, we will generally see it fall around 1,200 per person per day, just about. And of course, that's like a fully fleshed itinerary. I'd say in Greece, we might actually be able to do it for a little bit lower. I've seen us do it for like 800 per person per day. But it of course depends on the season as well and the room category.
Awesome. One question from Lauren. Can you please speak more about the Cadiz properties? I am well versed in Andronis and Cannabis, but wondering when you lean toward Cadiz. Same question for Crete properties if it doesn't take too much time.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not going to be able to go into too much detail on the catechies because we actually didn't see all of them. And that was the one thing that I wish we had been able to see more of. But for me, it really is when we think about location, they all have prime time location when we're thinking about Caldera. It's more of like a client price point situation for us when we kind of consider one property or the other. But I'm going to have to leave that full answer as kind of TBD because I don't think I'm the best one to answer just particularly on Katikis. Christine, I don't know if you have more experience with them per se.
Kind of say we didn't stay there, so I can't give you a firsthand experience there. The nice thing with the properties is they are in great locations. Some of them have some very nice villas. So, for example, I just had 5 women celebrating a 50th birthday party, and they took one of the catechies because they could stay in a 3-bedroom villa without breaking the bank. So it depends on what you're looking for, but they're all lovely. It's just a question of price point and location.
Awesome.
Yeah, and actually, I want to say too, because I don't think we put this on the presentation, and I'm terrible at following what the presentation says. But I want to share that, for example, I did actually see Videma, for example, when we were in Megalahori, because that was part of where we just stopped and enjoyed and did a little bit of shopping on our day exploration with our guide. And I really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. Many times people ask kind of, well, why wouldn't the clients want to go to IA? And many times people want to kind of be based somewhere else and just hop over to IA for a day trip, or kind of along the way of their day tour. And I think that that's just perfectly good of an itinerary, right? For me, you don't need to be in IA. If it's your first time in Santorini, of course, go enjoy, explore, stay in IA. We have amazing properties there. But if someone wants to go be in a Megarovigli, or if they want to be in Videma, which is in Megalahore, absolutely beautiful properties, amazing service. We actually did see the Andronis concept as well, which is not in IA, it's in Megarovigli, and I always say that with a horrible accent, so I apologize. But it was really nice actually, and it was super spacious, and we did a cooking class there. So I have to highlight that too, because there's a lot to see, you know, depending on where you're staying. And I know that Katikis has different locations as well, the same way Andronis and Canaves and many of the property collections do. So I'd recommend them fully. It's really about price point, I'd say, depending on where clients want to stay mostly. But I know you asked actually about Crete, and I'm happy to go into that because I feel like I got a really full and complete picture of Crete because my trip started in Crete and actually ended in Crete because I hopped over to Italy directly from Crete. And I think I saw like I think almost all of the properties that we work with there actually. And so I stayed at Cayo Resort, which is new for us, and it was fantastic. I was really happy because it was a very clean, kind of fresh feel. It did feel a little bit newer of a property, but for me, I saw families with other children there. I saw honeymooners, I saw older couples, I saw a multi-generational family. And something interesting about Crete that is important to mention too is that when we think about kind of which clientele goes there, our clientele tends to be mostly from the States, right? And so, of course, that's a very major market. But Crete is very, very much explored by Europeans too. And so you're going to see it all when you're on the island. And it's going to be a really wonderful mixture of kind of cultures and people. So you can very much get social as well on the properties. But what I liked about Cayo and what I liked in particular too about Playa Blue, where we were hosted at, is that it just feels so calm. And especially in Alunda, it feels super calm. You can kind of go do your own thing. There is no kind of noise or like there's no buzz going on. Like the sky is just absolutely clear. You can see the stars. It is serene in that way. And for me, it's important to know too that there is villa product in Ilunda in particular, and of course in Hanya in particular. So villa product is one thing, and then kind of resort feel is another thing on Crete. And I don't want to go by price point. I want to go by feeling, right? Because ultimately that it's an emotional sale when you sell it to the clients and kind of you tell them, well, no, you don't want to be here. You want to be there for what you're asking me for. And I'm going to kind of try to categorize things into different buckets. For me, kind of that true luxury boutique property feel was very much Faya Blue. And it's not just because we were hosted there. It was also just because of the room style and also because of kind of what they offer. And they're actually now going to be directly next to what is being developed as the first Rosewood in Greece. So they're going to be right next to that one. And I know that it's going to continue to very much be a boutique property, but it was sensational. And if someone's looking for boutique, they're looking for true luxury and just kind of the best possible Greek hospitality that you can get, that is Faya Blue. And they have a beautiful 3-bedroom villa. They have only one, and you can book it for 3 nights, for 2 nights, for 4 nights. It's not kind of a Saturday to Saturday villa, which is fantastic. And you have all of the same services from the villa. And for me, at a very good price point as well. And they have a kids club, which was just gorgeous, actually, the detail that I always pay attention to. And it felt cute and it felt like kind of just, you know, I don't know. That was a very homey property. I would honestly go back there. And I'm not the type of person who does repeat stays, and I would go back there 100%. But then you also have Kaya, which I would also actually go back to. It's a bit more of an open plan space. And so it does very much cater to larger groups, like multi-generational families. If you wanted to place someone there within 5 minutes, not even, from Faya Blue. So they literally have the same exact view of Spinalonga Island, just from different angles of the island. And they have a couple more restaurants. They feel a little bit more, I'd say almost like hip, like younger in their decor in a way, not as classical. But for me, nonetheless, an excellent property. And then we also saw the domes of Alunda, which has villas alike. And that one was for me a really good option for many different family structures, whether it's someone wanting, you know, like a kid's pool in a dedicated family area, which is large and kind of feels like its own resort. And then also the Crete and Malia, which was sensational. That was very much a family centric property, but directly on the beach, like toes to sand. And it's important that, you know, you can very much get that too in Crete. And you're going to get that more so in between Heraklion, which is like the airport area, and Alunda, where those are going to be very sandy beaches. So the Amirandes property, the Crete and Malia, and then a couple of others are very much going to be like those beach resorts that have villas. They have it all, and they're a little bit more spacious, but they're directly on the beach for clients. And so if they're looking for that type of feel, you know, it would be exactly that spread, I'd say, of properties that are on the beach versus Alunda, where the beach is actually like small rocks, for example, which is in no way, you know, a distraction from the beauty of the beach. But if someone's looking for a sandy beach, that isn't going to be, you know, Faya Blue or Kaya Resorts. You'd have to kind of take literally a 2-minute drive or a 5-minute walk down to a beach that is sandier. But in case clients ask that. So I don't know. I feel like I could talk a half hour on each property, so I will limit myself and go to the next question.
How many days do you recommend in Crete?
Christina, you take a stab at this one. I've said a lot.
Well, if you just want to stay in one place, I would stay in Alunda and probably spend 3 or 4 nights. But if you have the time, I would probably say do 5 to 6 nights so that you have time in Alunda where you can relax, see Spinalonga, and then make your way over to the other side of the island, which is much more of it's not really as a resorty of a feel as Alunda is. So I would probably say 5 to 6 nights if you want to move.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
agree. You know, I did see I saw Casa del Fino when we were in Hanya, and I really enjoyed it because it was more of like the small old town feel directly kind of on the water. And it is beautiful, but those rooms are a little bit smaller. So for someone to kind of stay and unpack for a week, I think it's a little bit more suited to kind of like a 2 to 3 night stay, specifically in Hanya. There's other options where you can certainly unpack and stay for a lot longer in a more comfortable scenario. But if you're going to do a split stay, I would definitely do Hanya, 2 or 3 nights, and then Ilunda for minimum 3 nights, honestly, because when you get to Alunda, if you're only staying 2 nights, the clients are going to feel like they want to be there longer. It's truly that spectacular, and you plenty of things to do and explore. I would never sell Crete for less than 3 nights. It feels rushed otherwise, like never less than 3.
Awesome. We have a comment from Carol. Great to know about full service in Greece. We also have a comment from Janine. Love that you took the 1-year-old. Good info to be able to tell young families. Also, we have a comment from Lindsay. Awesome. Thank you so much. This is so helpful. We also have a comment from Christina. My clients just stayed at Canaves Sunday in Santorini and loved it. Going back to the
We
catechist
I want to
question.
just comment really quick. Sorry, Mariana, on the cannabis Sunday. We saw all of them. I think Sunday was actually one that I wasn't expecting because they mentioned we can do a full buyout of that property, and it's kind of like one of the few that if you are going to have like a whole group of, I mean, like I don't know, maybe you need 10 rooms or maybe you need like 8 rooms, right? They can do a full buyout of that specific property, and then everyone shares the main pool area. So it's also important it's of course not a villa, right? It's going to be individual rooms, but that is one of the few properties on Caldera where you can do that a little bit more comfortably. And they mentioned that to us as well.
Awesome. Going back to the catechist question, Joni, our director of product, wanted to add that Catechist Santorini is on the cliff in Ia, dining, small spa, romantic infinity pools. On the cliff, good for honeymoon. Catechist Kirini is more wellness focused. It's more focused on the spa element, and it's at the entrance of Ia, so a bit further out, but still views. Catechist Garden is in Fida, not Ia. Huge shopping area, more residential vibe, more spacious, fine dining, and they allow kids. The others do not, which is really important. So more family focused. Catechist Chromate is in Imerovigli. Couples, small groups, more tranquil, more sophisticated. Kids only over 13. Still great views and honestly my favorite. We offer them all at UJV.
We should have unmiked Joni. What are we doing? Joni has to be on this next time.
Then we have a question from Stephanie. Do you have a top Elonda option you suggest for honeymooners wanting a beach resort?
If they want a beach resort, I would recommend maybe something like Amirandes because they have actually a 1-bedroom villa, and that's a slightly separate area with it's not a private section of beach, but they have their own reserved kind of like loungers, and it does feel a lot more private, and it's in its own little subset of the resort. So I would recommend they take a look at Amirandes because it'll be toes to sand, and they have a beautiful kind of central courtyard with a pool. So it's really beautiful, and they were actually almost at full occupancy when we were there, and it didn't feel busy at all. And that's a really important thing to share as well, because not all properties that when they're at full occupancy do you have that kind of still kind of private feel.
Awesome. And we have a great question from Carol. Do you have a Greek specialist or do I request my usual rep?
I would say you can request your usual rep just because almost everyone has been in Greece on the team. It's funny, and I was actually embarrassed to say this at the beginning of the call, but I lead the team in Greece with my blind spot. I hadn't been. And so I was super excited to be able to go and explore and enjoy it in that way. But the team is prepared and they know it very well. So feel free to send that over directly to them and they can absolutely handle it.
Awesome. If we don't have any more questions, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. This was a lovely conversation. We're going to be sending everyone an email with the recording. And if you have any questions, comments, or concern, you can always reach out to us.